So today we're going to talk about DevOps Center, some features that are going to really come in handy in your workflow. And then Matt's going to tell us a little bit about DevOps itself and as a little bit of a primer and how that can really improve your DevOps workflow at your organization.
Yeah, here we are, day 3, right? Day 3 at Dreamforce. You've probably seen this slide quite a bit. I want to make sure it's not trite. We're honored to be here in front of you today talking to you. We're honored that you've chosen to come and listen to what we have to say on this subject. So I want to say thank you very much for being here. And everyone that we've talked to at Salesforce as we got prepared for this was all super excited and thankful for the great crowd, the great turnout, and everyone being here to hear all the exciting things that we're bringing to the table. So thank you.
So quick introductions. My name is Evan Maxwell. I'm a senior manager at CapTech. I started my admin journey about 12 years ago, and since then, I operate as a solution architect at CapTech. We're a Salesforce implementation partner, and I get to work with folks like Matt Comer.
Yeah, thanks, Evan. I've been with CapTech for, close to 25 years. I started doing work in the Salesforce ecosystem back in 2016. I have 16 Salesforce and MuleSoft certifications, and I work as an admin, a dev, and an architect with great people like Evan. So we're so excited to talk to you guys today. And Evan will be helping us drive some demos later, too. So it's not all talk. We've got some things to show you.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start with a question, and I want everybody to be honest with me, even folks watching at home. How many of you are using change sets to deploy changes at your organization? A lot of us. Me too. Me too. And we all know change sets. In fact, they've been with us since the Winter 10 release, which kind of introduced alongside Salesforce knowledge and one of my personal favorites, the is blank formula.
Blank. All right.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah. One of my favorites.
And there's a lot of good, right? It's a click-based interface to deploy our changes. There's nothing to install. It lives right there for us in setup. And even today, it's great for deploying simple changes, especially for those of us in a solo admin role or in a small team. But I think a lot of us have found there are a lot of limitations there, right? There's limited metadata support. So for those that have tried to deploy maybe new opportunity stages, right? No standard pick list support, no sales process support, things like search layouts and more, we just find ourselves needing, manual steps to get those into production. And for those of us that are working on bigger teams, maybe a couple admins, some developers, it's really easy to overwrite each other's changes. And there's no straightforward way to merge those together. And then even more, they're time consuming to create, right? So you work hard, you build the change set, you get it into your UAT environment so your stakeholders can test it. And then what happens? All right, if you have other admins, you need to work with them to, which components did you change? All right, let's get that into a change set and let's deploy that into production. So it's a new change set every single time. And then something Matt's going to talk a little bit more about is, it's not connected to source control and it's hard to track releases, which lowers the amount of transparency to our stakeholders. Who made changes, when, and why? And that kind of gets to the notion of what's called DevOps. And so, Matt, can you talk about
Absolutely. DevOps. So DevOps, there's that word. It's right in the name of the product, DevOps Center, right? So it must be important. Well, it is, but it can also be intimidating. This is potentially an intimidating chart just to look at. My God, it's a spiral, it's a swirl, there's all these words, right? What does it mean? And it sounds like it could be very technical, doesn't it, right? At developers, as an awesome admin, how does this apply to me? What does DevOps have to do with me, right, as an admin? Well, we're trying to kind of demystify DevOps. DevOps is just a process. DevOps is just the way that you take your ideas, your requirements, and get them through a process of making those changes, testing those changes, moving those changes through a pipeline, and we'll talk about what a pipeline is in a minute, such that at the end of the day, you end up with stable, tested, quality software in production. And that process is about the people and the process more than the tools. Tools are an important part of a DevOps process, but We can do DevOps with a variety of different tools. We are talking about DevOps Center here today, and one thing about DevOps Center is it is an extremely approachable tool. It's a great tool for awesome admins to be able to explore more robust and more mature DevOps processes because it's very approachable. You don't have to know a lot of the details about what's going on in version control behind the scenes. You don't have to understand Git and branching and arcane command line commands and et cetera, et cetera. All of that is hidden from you, but you get the advantages, right? So we're going to talk a lot about that. But at the end of the day, DevOps is about your organization and the way that you work. Your DevOps process has got to be about you. It can't be about someone else. There's a lot of best practices out there, lots of information on the internet. We consult with a lot of people on establishing DevOps processes, but it's a very personal journey. And we're glad to talk today about DevOps Center specifically again, because it is so approachable and friendly. All right. So one important concept here, and we're talking about two things on this slide, but first, source of truth. What is your source of truth? That's an important question, and it's a complicated question when you're using change sets and sandboxes, because production, maybe that's my source of truth, right? That makes a certain amount of sense. My production org is where all of my code finally ends up, so maybe that's my source of truth. Well, what about the changes that I've made in development that meet the user's requirements, but which I haven't promoted up my pipeline yet? Well, those are important, right? I don't want to lose those. What about changes that I've brought together and integrated maybe with someone else's changes and I'm preparing to test? Well, gosh, that took some time, right? We did some integration. Maybe we merged some things, right? Whatever. I don't want to lose those. So maybe that's my source of truth. Well, the reality is that if you're using sandboxes and change sets, those are all true, right? And that's not ideal. We need a single place that we can go to answer those questions of what changed? Who changed? Why? When? And even most importantly, where is that change in my process, right? I don't want to lose changes. I don't want to inadvertently promote changes. I want to know exactly where my changes are in my process reliably. And the only way that's going to happen is if we shift to what's called a source-driven process, not an org-driven process. Fortunately, DevOps Center helps us do that, so it's super exciting. The other thing I want to talk about here real quickly is this concept of a pipeline, because that's going to come up when we see the demo. Pipeline sounds complicated, but it's not, right? It's just this idea that we have multiple sandboxes connected together in a way that supports our process. So there isn't one pipeline that's going to fit every circumstance in every organization. We need to think about how many people do you have doing development, quote, right? How many admins, how many devs? How do you like to work? Do we need to create sandboxes individually for those folks? Do we then need to integrate those into an environment to make sure that we can merge things together? What kinds of testing do we do in my organization? Maybe you don't have UAT. Maybe that's just not something that you do as part of your process. Maybe it is, right? Maybe you don't have functional testers, like a separate functional testing team, but maybe you do, right? So really designing a pipeline that fits your needs is critically important. And then, although we aren't going to talk about that a lot today, configuring that pipeline in DevOps Center so it understands those environments and how they relate to each other. And we are going to see how we promote changes up a pipeline. So pipeline's important.
Thanks, Matt. So change sets aren't enough to get this job done in order to have our source of truth outside of the org. Uh-oh. There we go. So Salesforce introduced DevOps Center. I like to think of DevOps Center as Salesforce Flow for DevOps. So Flow has given us admins the ability to write complex automations, triggers, all with a few or more clicks. And DevOps Center does that for DevOps and deployments. So it lets us track changes in a modern UI, no more clicking next, next, next on those lists of components to find what we need. It seamlessly integrates with version control. So as Matt was saying, that allows our source of truth to be outside of the org. But just like change sets, we can still deploy those changes across environments with a few clicks. And if you have developers on your team, they can still work directly. They can use all of their Git commands and VS Code, and DevOps Center can keep up with that. But those are great. Those are highlight banner features. But what is this going to mean for you day to day? And I like to frame this in a way of what won't you have to do? So who here uses sticky notes or spreadsheets or emails to track?
Keep up with all my changes, right? Got to have a spreadsheet or a
Gotta,
list.
yeah. What's going into UAT next week? Hard to say. In DevOps Center, we can see in that screenshot, uses different swim lanes to represent our pipeline and tell us what changes are where. And something that has happened to me all too frequently is, you're adding a new pick list value and you forget to deploy the record type. So then you have to make another change set, deploy that again, and hopefully you got everything this time. With sandbox source tracking, Salesforce is actually keeping up with what changes you're making. And DevOps Center can then pull in those changes. You select what you want to include. And then another thing that tends to happen is every so often we have to make a change directly in production, right? And then 6, 7, 8 months later, you're going back, wait, what did we do? Why did we do that? Why isn't this working now? And so with our source of truth outside of the org, we have that traceability and that transparency. 2 additional features that I'm personally really excited about that wasn't as highlighted on that high-level feature slide is out-of-date dev sandboxes. This happens to me all the time. Matt's working on a feature, he promotes that to our QA environment, and now I'm working on a similar component, and we're overriding each other's changes. Because DevOps Center is tracking exactly what changes are being made and where they're located in our pipeline, it'll just tell me my environment's out of date. And then, I'm not kidding, 2 clicks, and it will back deploy those changes into your development environment, and that way you can start fresh on the right foot. And then lastly, think about deployment day. You've got the deployment, let's say it goes off without a hitch, and now you have all of those post-deploy steps to delete what you've replaced. Maybe those process builders or workflow rules that I am sure we've all had to deal with and migrate to Flow. DevOps Center supports what are called destructive changes, which means as part of your package and deployment, it can remove those old components. So how is your life going to look with DevOps Center? So in order to access DevOps Center, you log into production. That's a little bit of a change from change sets, right? Because in change sets, you have to go, where did you make the change, create that outbound change set. So in DevOps Center, we go straight to production, and we create a work item, which you can think of that kind of like a JIRA ticket. In fact, safe harbor, that integration's coming soon. And you'll describe your changes, and then we'll select the changes we want to include. So again, DevOps Center is going to know what we change. We can also add manual components as needed. And then we'll commit those changes, which if you're not familiar with Git jargon, that really just means we save it to version control. That's it.
Goes into our system of record.
Goes into our system of record. And then I'm, of course, confident that nothing I ever make ever has a bug. But we'll follow some best practices, and we'll create a review. I'll send it over to Matt to get his eye on it and, give me the thumbs up. And after that, we can promote those changes to the next environment and move down our pipeline. So let's see it in action. So first what we're going to see is we're going to use DevOps Center to actually pull down those changes. And I am not at all brave enough to do this live, so we've got it pre-recorded. And so...
It's not CGI, though. This is real.
So we've got our work items here. You can see we've got 2 that are already promoted. And we have this new one there at the bottom, adding a contact lookup field to opportunity. And so I just need to select that. I'll select my development environment that I'm working in, and I'll click Proceed. So DevOps Center is making a branch for us. And when I click Pull Changes there, all of my changes have pulled in. I can select those, type in a commit message, which just describes the changes I just made, and click Commit Changes. I didn't need to learn any complicated Git commands or anything like that. DevOps Center just does the work for me.
So wait a minute. You're saying that all with clicks, you were able to interact with version control, create a branch, identify your changes from your sandbox without having to have a list and remember them all, and get them committed into version control just like that?
Absolutely.
Wow. That's impressive.
So I've got a second demo. We're going to fast forward a little bit. So let's say that Matt has already gone in. He's reviewed my work. He's given it the thumbs up because, of course, it was bug-free. And so now let's actually see this deploy across our pipeline. And so here we have our swim lanes. We have our approved work items there on the left. And then every swim lane beyond that is a different environment in our pipeline. So this is like Kanban, if you use that at your organization. So let's deploy it, right? This is going to be really complicated. I'm going to check the work item, and then I'm going to click Promote Selected. It'll give me a little modal, and I'll just click OK. That's where I could select like an Apex unit test, and then, wow, it's deployed. And if I want to move all those changes now into UAT, I can select all and move those forward. And so let's fast forward to our production release day. We've moved everything into staging, and we now have all of our changes bundled so that we have a clean deployment, and we don't have to worry about finding our changes. They're all there, and with one click, they're deployed to production. You're happy, your other admins are happy, and your stakeholders and your users are happy.
So hold on again. Wow. You were able to package up changes, promote them through the pipeline, bundle them and deploy them into production, all with a few clicks, and without having to recreate a bunch of change sets?
Makes life easy.
Whew, I tell you.
So the name of the session is How Do We Make Them Move? So probably we should talk about that, right? So there's a couple things you need, and the first one is going to be real tricky. You need a Salesforce org. And I think some people may have one of those already.
Got one. Yeah.
Got one? What else do they need?
They're going to need a pipeline. We talked about that earlier, right? You need to think about, a pipeline can be just a couple of sandboxes, but we do need to have a place to make changes, a place to promote changes up for testing, and then, of course, a production environment, right? So we've got to have at least a basic pipeline, probably a minimum of 2 sandboxes, but could be certainly more complex than that if you need it to be.
And then we need a version control repository. Today, DevOps Center supports GitHub, and now in open beta supports Bitbucket, with other repos like Azure DevOps or GitLab are on the way. So let's try it out. So in your org today, you can go to Setup, type in DevOps Center, you can click Enable, and then install the package. There'll be a few post-installation steps, like connecting to your environments, deciding what your pipeline looks like, and you'll be ready to go. So this will need to be in your production org if you have professional, enterprise, and unlimited edition. But if you're not quite ready to roll that out to your organization, you can spin up a developer edition or even a scratch org. Try it out there, get comfortable with the installation steps before you do it in production.
And although the production thing might sound a little scary, right? Everyone who is going to capture changes and deploy things at least up into an initial, like integration sandbox, will need to have access. Mm-hmm. There are limited sets of permissions that you can set up to give, for example, a developer access to DevOps Center only in production without having full access to the org.
Oh, Matt, and then there's the best part. It's included. There's no extra licensing. You don't need to contact your AE. It's included in those additions, and you can try it out right after this session.
Same price as change sets, but a lot better. Yeah. So, one thing that's really cool about DevOps Center, and we're seeing this more and more, there was an announcement last week about even more of this, right, is how open and transparent the product team is that's delivering on the product. We've got a QR code in just a minute, right, that you can get to this, but this is essentially the Kanban board in GitHub for the team that is building DevOps Center. So you can see what features are on the backlog. You can contribute to prioritization on those features. There's even a process that you can introduce your own features, things that you want to see. So as, for example, Evan mentioned, Azure Git, you can go out there and look and see they're currently saying, safe harbor, first half 2025, that'll be delivered, right? So if you want to see what's going on with DevOps Center, that's a great place to go and look. Also, there's a really fantastic and active community group where the product team and users are out there collaborating around how to use the tool, any problems they're running into, fixes, workarounds, again, feedback on development and features and et cetera. So it's a great place to check in and learn.
All right. And thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. We will do questions. We think we're at time, so we'll hang around and answer a few questions for those that have it. And you can scan that QR code, and we'll send the deck out right to you.
Yeah, if you want this deck, scan that code. We'll send it right out to you.
Bring it back. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.